welcome to another edition of Getting to Know Your Indiana Neighbor. And today we're talking to Christy Farhar. Some of you know her, some of you may not. She's not a native Martin Countian, but she's been here for a long time. And the location we're in right now is the River Church. It's just across the White River Bridge. You know where it is. It's the old Crim Enterprises building. And this church, this building belongs to Christy Farhar and her husband, Ed Farhar. And we're going to talk about Christy a lot of things today, but let's start with this building. I'm not sure a lot of people
Mhm.
know. I did not know until this morning of this recording that this was your church.
Uh-huh.
So tell me a little bit about the origins of that, who owned it before you, and how you got involved in starting a church, the River.
Okay. So it's kind of a long story, but so we went to several churches throughout our time of being married, Ed and I, and we decided one time. I mean, it took about 9 months. I said it was like a birthing process of going in between different churches and figuring out there's something that people are missing. Like there's just some people. There's a group of people that people aren't reaching. And that was the people that were just coming out of being incarcerated, the people that were addicts and that kind of thing. Because at the time, Ed and I were working in the Martin County Jail. He would go in on Sundays and I would go in on Tuesdays. He would work with the men and I would work with the women. And I would teach overcomer classes, addiction classes. He would preach. And so Ed used to walk around the town. I always tell people it was kind of creepy because he spent about a year prayer walking and he would go out after dark, like 10 o'clock at night. And I didn't know he did it for a long time. I actually didn't even know he was gone until one night I got up and he wasn't there, but his car was there. And I thought, where in the world is he at? Well, he spent almost a year prayer walking the city limits of Shoals. And every time he would prayer walk to figure out what it was that he felt called to do, he always landed back at this building. And this building had sat empty for 10 years. So we really didn't know a lot about it. Of course, we know the Crims, Carly and the girls and that kind of stuff through school. But we really didn't know a lot. And I said, well, just call them and ask them if they'll buy it, if you can buy it. And he was like, I'm not calling them. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't like rejection. Okay, Ed, I'll call them. So they live in Tampa, Florida. So I called them, got their phone number, called them, and just said, hey, are you interested in selling the building? And they're like, no, we're not really interested. I was like, okay, no big deal. Hung up. That was fine. A week later, they called me back and they said, what do you want the building for? And I said, well, we started a church. In 2013, we planted a church. It was just down the road here a little ways. And we just are outgrowing that building and we want something more permanent. And so they said, well, let's talk about it and see what we can do. So we told them our vision for the area and the church and what it was, and they didn't hesitate. They said, okay, we'll sell it to you for considerably less than what they were asking. And it was a number that when they told us, we were like, oh, we have to get it. So we came up here, I think it was in November of 2014 that we signed the purchase agreement. I don't know if you want the details, but we were on a 10-year contract with them, and then after the 10 years, we pay them a balloon payment. So that's in 2014 or 2024.
So 2024,
hmm
you own the building.
Yep.
Well, that's amazing. I did not know that. So that's not even why I'm here talking to Christy Farhart, but that's interesting enough already what she's told me, particularly about over at the jail and what
Yep.
you did there. But you're not a native of Martin County, right? Let's kind of start
No,
from the beginning. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Bedford. So I actually, Ed says I can't say I'm from Bedford because I grew up in Avoca,
Avoca.
but it's
Yeah,
a Bedford address.
it
I
is.
went to school at BNL. And
Mhm.
every time I say I went to school at BNL, everybody always says,
It's a big school.
well, that or did you know Damon Bailey? Like that's
Okay.
always the thing. And I was like, yeah, I went to school with Damon Bailey. His sister Courtney was actually in my
Mhm.
class.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time, of course, BNL girls were pretty
Mhm.
successful in their
Very,
basketball.
very.
I think they were runners up in 90, 90, and then I think they won it in 91. And then, of course, BNL boys. I
Right.
still remember going to the Hoosier Dome.
Yeah.
Now, Ed corrected me and said, no, it was the RCA Dome. And I said, yeah, but everybody called it. And he said, yeah, you're right. Everybody called it the Hoosier
Yeah,
Dome.
I was thinking it was the Hoosier Dome, but if Ed
Yeah,
says it's the RCA Dome, that's probably
trust me,
right.
he knows
Yeah.
his sports. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember going there and
Mhm.
watching that state championship
Mhm.
game. But anyway, I grew up there in Bedford. Went to school at Olytic. Do you know where Olytic's
I know
at?
where Olytic is.
Yeah.
The Olytic Bearcats.
Bearcats.
Yep.
Yeah, I was a
Mhm.
Bearcat.
Okay. And Ed grew up in Shoals.
Ed grew up in Martin County.
Mhm.
Yeah, he grew up in Shoals. It's kind of a confusing story. Um, so I told you last week we were in Oklahoma.
Yes, you
So
were.
that's
Mhm.
actually where his family originated, kind of. So his great grandpa was a German in the Russian army.
Okay.
And when Russia turned communist, he got on a boat, took his wife and his mother in law, and Ed said, "Why would you ever take your mother in law?" Got on a boat and
Somebody
came,
had to take her,
to,
right?
I guess, and they came to America, signed
Mhm.
in at Ellis Island. We actually have the paperwork,
Mhm.
well, a copy of it, where they signed in. Went ahead around to Galveston, Texas, and then landed in Okeen, Oklahoma.
And that just goes back to his great grandfather.
Great grandfather, he actually changed the spelling of the last name.
Hmm.
So I've done some ancestry on it, and I think the spelling was Phrherr.
Okay. Now it's Farhar.
Easy.
Easy enough. Well, how did you meet Ed? You're Bedford. He's Shoals. Close enough, but what
We're
led
also
you to
10
him?
years apart.
Are you?
Yeah,
Okay.
he's 10 years my senior. I always tell people he's a lot older than I am. So I worked at a little restaurant in Bedford called the Three Pigs. Did you ever hear the Three
I've not
Pigs?
heard of the Three Pigs.
Tiny little restaurant. I worked there through high school and then when I first went to college. And the restaurant itself is all regulars. I mean, you didn't really have out of town people that came in, it was all
Right.
regulars. So
Hmm.
Ed's sister and her husband were regulars there. And I had already had my son Cole at the time, and he was a year old. And she was like, "Hey, I think you might want to meet my brother." And I was like, "Nah, I'm not interested." So one day she called me and she said, "Hey, I've got some clothes over here for Cole if you want to come get them." I went to her house and who was sitting there but Ed. And I thought he was a jerk. I mean, he had on his flannel shirt and his hat, and he was I just didn't think he was a very nice person and talked to him for a little bit and then I left. And that was that. Well, he called me several times over the next 2 weeks. And my mom finally said, just go out with the guy so he'll quit calling you. So that was in April of 97. I went out with him. We got engaged in September and we were married the following April.
That happened.
And we've been married, it'll be 25 years in April.
That's amazing.
So
Well, congratulations,
thanks.
by the way.
Thanks.
So, those of you who don't necessarily know Christy, okay, the story's interesting enough so far. No question about that. But the reason I wanted to talk to Christy, the reason I started this series is to talk to people who have had an impact on our community, a positive story, or just a story, maybe even a
Mm.
crazy story. She does all three. She fits all three of those. But not just an impact in our community, an impact across the world that we'll get into. If you follow her on Facebook at all, you know that she's involved with some projects that we'll talk extensively about that involves travel to Africa and for the good of others around the world. But before we do that, Christy, um, you've kind of led a life that a lot of people would like to leave just on the outside. Well, and I'm talking
Yeah,
about travel for one, but I understand travel sometimes can be a little much.
especially nowadays.
But doing for others,
Mm.
it sounds like at least your entire adult life, for the
Yeah.
most part, doing for others, fostering children, adopting children. Let's start there. You just said that you had given birth.
Mhm.
Um, and that child is the only one that you had given birth to. You've got
Yeah.
six others that you fostered, and then have all of them been adopted?
So all of them, okay, let's just start. Let me just go back real quick. So I told you I grew up in Bedford. My mom and dad, actually my dad's from Greene County, Elnora,
Hmm.
Elnora. So Ray and Becky Woodsmall, and they actually had foster kids as well. So my sister and I were 22 months apart. My sister Andrea, and then when I was 11, they decided to foster. So they fostered two kids and ended up adopting them, and then they adopted another child. So I actually have my biological sister Andrea, and then two Hispanic siblings, and then an African American brother. And so we have a multicultural
Yeah.
family, and so I think that probably set the stage for maybe how my life would go. But I knew I never wanted to be a foster parent. Like that
Really?
was some
Okay. So you experienced it as a child with foster siblings,
yeah.
and that's not something you wanted to do in
Because
your
it
life.
was so difficult for my
Right.
parents, not because it was a hardship on me,
Hmm.
because my brothers and sisters are my brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
I guess I could say I've always had a heart for like justice or injustice, and my mom used to say that I used to stand up for everybody that was being picked on, or
Hmm.
and so for me it was always, I guess, an honor to have them as siblings, and I was very protective. But I saw how hard it was on my parents to go through the foster care system, and my brother and sister were in foster care off and on for 5 years before they adopted them. There was a history of severe abuse on my little brother, and he was 5 months old when my mom and dad actually, got him. My little sister was a year and a half. So I just saw how difficult that was for them, in that, and I just it just wasn't anything that I wanted to be a part of. But it was actually a call that Ed had, and, when he approached me with it, I said no at first. I was like, "Uh-uh."
He
Yeah.
he knew, of course, of your
Yeah.
rearing, right? Involved in it.
Yes, and so whenever Ed and I got married, of course, we had Cole, and Cole was 2, almost 3 when we got married, so he would have turned 3 a couple months after we got married. And then, Ed's 2 older children, so Amy and Chad. Chad, who is now Chloe. And so I adopted Amy. I didn't adopt, Chloe because they were older at that point. And, so we had them as well. They were I think we'd been married about a year when they came to live with us full time. So I was 22 years old when I got married and all of a sudden had 3 kids.
Okay.
And I was
Good
like,
luck. Yeah.
"Whoa." Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so throughout the span of their life, Amy they were Amy and Chloe were at school at Lagodi until 3rd grade, and then they came to Shoals because, of course, that's where we lived. Um, Cole and Amy graduated from Shoals. Chloe graduated from Lagodi and then, moved to he lives in or they live in Seattle, Washington now. Amy teaches at Shoals out here,
Mhm.
and, Cole lives in Indianapolis. So it's kind of a long story, but Cole's senior year of high school, so he was the only one left at home. Ed approached me. It was in the fall. I think it was the fall of 2011, no, 2012, and said, "Hey, we're going to have an extra bedroom opening up soon." And I was like, "Yes, I've got all kinds of plans. I think we should have an
Mhm.
office." Like I had all these ideas, and he looked at me and he was like, "No, I think we should go into foster care." And I said,
Mhm.
"Absolutely not. Like that is not something I'm
Yeah.
interested in." And that was it.
No, it wasn't.
I know. I know. So out it took a little bit, and then I kind of felt guilty because Ed's not one to ever express that he wants to do something, or he
Mhm.
always puts everybody else above
Right.
himself. And um, I thought, well, if this is something that he really feels strongly about, maybe we should look into it. So we began our foster care license. You know Lauren Biggs.
I do.
So Lauren and we've been good friends for several years, and they had fostered and adopted.
I didn't know that.
And
Mhm.
yes, so they actually have a really cool story. And they have adopted 3, and then have 1 biological. But so we had kind of talked to them and got a little bit of the ins and outs, so that we thought, and we started our licensing. And I remember it's kind of a funny story how we ended up with the 4 kids that we adopted. I actually had carpal tunnel surgery. Dr. Love, Mike Love did it.
Right.
And I was actually under the knife, so to say, and they called Ed and said they had 3 kids if we would take them
From the same family.
from the same family. And Ed said, "Yeah, we'll take them." Without even talk. I mean, I was like,
Pretty big decision, Ed.
yeah. So they they woke me up, and Dr. Love said,
Under the
"Hey,
knife.
Ed's got something to tell you." I was like,
Nobody
"Okay."
has this on videotape, do they? No.
No,
Okay.
thankfully,
All
because
right.
I probably was about ready to kill him.
Okay.
Ed's got something to tell you, and I'm like, "What is it?" And he was like, "Well, we have an hour to get home, and we have these 3 kids that are
Oh.
coming." And I was
Oh.
like, "Well, 3 kids turned into 4 kids,
Mhm.
because our oldest of the 4 we adopted has a different biological dad.
Mhm.
So she was supposed to go to his home, and it didn't work out. So um, most everybody knows our kids. Judea is the oldest. She's a sophomore. Daniel. So it's 6, 7, 8, 10 in grades. So Judea, Daniel, Riken, and Millie. So they were 2, 3, 4, and 6 when we got them.
All 3, or were 3 of the 4, all 4 from the same family?
All 4, same mom, different. Judea has a different biological dad.
And the circumstances that they gave those kids up were
It was they had a history of drug abuse,
okay.
and
And
um,
that's the way it often is, right?
it's the way it often is. And we got him, and they said we would have him for 28 days.
Okay. So the foster process is you go through a process, you're going to get them for a certain amount of time.
Hmm.
Then what?
Well, see, and when we got our foster care license, we were not interested in adopting. That was not our goal. Our goal was that we wanted to be a resource for people that were trying to get their life together
Mhm.
and that we could help them to get their children back. So we never even took the adoption classes. So when you take the classes, there's several different ways you can do it. You can do respite, which is just you just are a resource for foster parents if they need to go on vacation or if they need some time off. You take the kids for a short period of time. You can do a kinship placement, which is just what it says, kinship placement, family placement. You can do fostering, foster to adopt, or you can do just adoption. So we just did fostering because we were almost empty nesters.
Right.
Our kids were grown.
Right.
Amy was in college. Cole was a senior, like I said, in high
Mhm.
school. And we got the kids. It was March of 2013. Actually, it was the day before Millie's second birthday, or the day after Millie's second birthday, March 22nd, 2013, that we got him. They said we'd have him for 28 days, and 10 years later.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that says that the biological parents can't see these children, or how did?
Now,
Well, initially,
so the foster care system is tricky just in that um, it is a lot of wearing your emotions on your sleeves. You don't know where you're going to be, and it's an ebb and flow of things are good, things are not good, things are good, and you don't
mhm,
know as foster parents. And uh, this may sound bad to say from the foster parent side, as foster parents, a lot of times you feel like you're the ones kind of on trial, um, just because you're being entrusted with these kids, but you don't know a lot of the circumstances. You're not being told details. I didn't know until several months into our fostering that we could even go to the court proceedings. So then, of course, we started doing that, and it's kind of it's a lot of unknown. So if you like to know, like I'm the type of person when I read a book, I read the last chapter first. It drives
mhm,
my sister crazy because I want to know how it's going to
right,
end. I kind of like control too.
mhm,
And so that was probably the biggest thing that got me out of my comfort zone was there's no control. You
yeah,
have absolutely none. And like I said, they told us we would have them for 28 days. So after we got them in March, in October they were supposed to have trial home visits. They had visits every week. That was your question. See, this is
yeah.
what I do. I get off on a
That's okay.
tangent.
So they had visits with.
Biological mom.
They did every week. Okay.
Biological dad didn't express interest in
Mhm,
visits because they're the three younger biological dad never really knew the kids. Like he
mhm,
was never really in the picture. It was just biological mom. And so they had visits. I think it was like 4 hours every week. It started out, and then it gradually increased from there. So in October of 2013, they did a trial home visit that was supposed to be a weekend long, and it just didn't really work
right.
out for um, eh, just many different reasons. And I would never speak ill will of the kids' biological parents because I feel like they did the best that they could
Mhm,
with what they had.
right.
And I always tell my kids, of course, my kids know their story. They know they're adopted. They know who their biological parents are. They don't see them. They don't have contact with them. Um, However, I always tell them that they did the most loving thing that they could have for them whenever they signed their rights over because they knew they couldn't take care of them. I actually had a conversation with their biological mom several months ago. Um, from what I understand, she's clean now, and we had a conversation, and she just expressed her gratitude for us.
Not regret, but gratitude. So once they sign over the rights, they have no right to their
So
biological
what
children.
happens in our case? We had several different. She had several different instances to get the kids back. And do you know Anita Wildman?
I do
So
know that.
Anita Wildman was our CASA. Do you know what a CASA is?
I don't think I
It's
do.
a court-appointed special
I
advocate
don't.
for the kids.
Okay.
So they come in and they are basically just advocates for the kids. So they come into our home, they go into the biological parents' home, they go. So Anita Wildman, you know Anita.
I do.
I mean, she's a bulldog and she fought hard for our kids. If it
Way to
had
go, Anita.
oh,
That's Anita. We know
and
Anita.
our kids were the only kids that she had.
Hmm.
After that case, she said I can't do it anymore. She said it's too hard.
Oh wow.
But if it had not have been for her, I don't
Hmm.
feel like our case would have progressed as quick. It didn't seem quick to me
Hmm.
because it was 2 years after we started the process before we adopted them. but she's just amazing. I mean, she
Hmm.
just really she didn't care what Ed and I thought. She didn't care what the biological parents thought. She didn't care what DCS thought. She only cared about those kids, and she still does to this day. And she,
So, but you've got four small children,
mm-hmm.
so four different minds. Um, and I guess I'm trying to ask, as they go into your house, they've been abused, they've lived in a, I won't say a non-loving home, but potentially that.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're going into a situation. How do they trust? How do
It,
they fall into trusting, especially for 28 days initially, you and Ed?
they still to this day struggle with. So for a long time, Riken, everybody that knows Riken knows that he's kind of the I think I can't remember which teacher it was that said that if anybody was a poster child for ADHD, it is Riken. Um, but he's hilarious, and
Yeah.
I mean, he's just a great kid.
Hmm.
Now he's the kid that makes me want to pull my hair out the most. But
Hmm.
he, even up until probably about the last year, and we've had him almost 10 years, would always ask me, "When is DCS coming to get me? Like when
Really?
am I?" Yeah, like
Really?
he's still
Did he want that, or was he afraid
no,
of that?
he was so fearful
Okay.
of that. And so we actually did foster several other
Hmm.
kids. And after we adopted them, we actually had to let our foster care license go because it was more detrimental to him.
Hmm.
Because they would come pick up other foster kids for visits, and you would find him in a corner. Like
Hmm.
um, he would
Hmm.
just lose it. So, I mean, it takes lots of therapy. Like our kids are still in therapy to learn. Um, Jadea is probably the one that remembers everything. The other ones don't. Like Millie, she was too young.
Hmm.
Riken, I think he was too young, but he probably deals with the trauma the most. Like he's the one that we have to really, um, kind of watch and just see how we. You kind of have to change the way you parent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's different from parenting our older kids than parenting kids that come from a hard place.
Yeah. And at what point, and I'm sure they were all different, but at what point did you feel like this is our family? Everybody understands this is our family, as opposed to this is still a trial period for these kids.
Oh, I think day one. I mean, we were never we Ed and I have no biological children together. I don't know if I said that or not, but and we have never been one to say stepkids or
Hmm.
adopted kids
Hmm.
or they're just our kids.
Right.
They're just our family. Now, in the foster care system, you have to be careful because you can't call yourself mom and dad
At that time.
at
Okay.
that time. So
Hmm.
it was kind of hard for the kids because um, they started calling Ed dad pretty quickly because they never had a dad. I was
Hmm.
Christy for a long time, which I was fine with. Like that didn't
Hmm.
bother me a bit. Um, and it's kind of funny because I remember Millie was the first one to call me mama, and then kind of from there it went on. But I think we'd already adopted him at that point
Hmm.
because it's you have to be very careful with labels and
Were there any problems with the children in school because of the background that they had in the situation
oh, most
that they
definitely,
were in?
most
Because it
definitely.
was different.
So our kids were in school at Shoals.
Hmm.
Um, Jadea would have been in first grade after we adopted him. So she was in kindergarten before we adopted him, and we were getting calls every day. Now, if you know Jadea now, everybody's like, I cannot believe that because she is the sweetest, most kind,
Hmm.
loving. I mean, she doesn't say a bad word about. She wouldn't say a bad word about Charles Manson. That's just how she
Hmm.
is. She's so kind. But we were getting calls every day about her. It was just her. It was just terrible. Um, I remember one time, one time they called and said that she had flooded the whole bathroom because she just wanted to make bubbles, and so she had taken all the soap out of all the dispensers and
Hmm.
had all these kids come in. They were just having a bubble party in the bathroom.
It happens, Judea.
Yeah, I mean,
It just
um,
happened to be you.
they have had a lot of problems with discipline and just learning disabilities.
Hmm.
Jadea, and she wouldn't care that I said it. Jadea and Millie both, three out of the four kids have IEPs. Um, I'm sure you know with Lynn. Lynn's worked with all of my kids.
She has, but I don't know that I'm familiar with IEP.
So individual educational plans. So
Okay.
basically, it's just the kids that have like learning disabilities.
Hmm.
They have these plans in place that the school actually gives them the best resources they can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me back up a little bit. So the kids were at Shoal School, and this is kind of a controversial topic because after we adopted the kids, we made the decision to move them from Shoal School to Lagodi School. That was when Dara was still here, who Dara Cheesem, she is
Mm-hmm.
like the most amazing
Mm-hmm.
person. She was so good in advocating for our kids when they came to school at Lagodi. And really, everybody at Lagodi was so welcoming. But when we moved our kids, we knew we would probably get some pushback from people in this area. I've never understood it because going to BNL, in Lawrence County, like we had big rivalries, but there is nothing like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
sectional 63
Yeah.
rivalry. Like they're just not.
And going across the river.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So we knew that we would probably get some pushback. We didn't move our kids for athletic reasons. We didn't move our kids for education reasons. We moved our kids based solely for they needed a new start. They needed to be Farhars in a place where people only knew them as Farhars. And that's why we moved them. Now, we did get some pushback. We had a lot of people that were very upset. I sat on the school board out here for 14 years. My daughter teaches school over here.
Right.
Ed coached basketball and softball over here. I mean, we were very invested in the school system here, but we felt like it was the best move for our kids. And I can say to this day, it's been the best thing we ever did for our kids,
Mm-hmm.
solely for the fact that a lot of people, probably maybe even until they watch this, don't know that they really aren't biologically ours.
Yeah.
So it, I don't even remember the question.
Well, no.
Just the whole.
Yeah, just how they were treated at school and.
It was. I think it was hard for a lot of people because a couple of them, the older two, especially Janae and Daniel, really kind of struggled with discipline issues. Because if you're not really disciplined or anything at home, it's hard to go into a structured setting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was hard for some people, not even just in a school setting, but to change the mindset of they're no longer.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So you've got 4 kids at home, right?
Mhm.
And then you get involved with some projects around the globe.
Mhm.
So I want to talk about that a little bit. Now, the Micah, do you say Micah 6.8?
Micah 6.8 project.
Just Micah 6.8 project. It deals basically, you're an advocate against human trafficking.
Mhm.
And even though we don't hear that much in this community about it, it's about. But where did you get first involved with the Micah 6.8 project and going all the way around the world to help others?
So I actually founded the Micah 6.8
You
project.
founded
I don't
it.
know if you knew that or
I
not.
did not know that.
So in 2010, I had a girl call me and she was like, "Hey, you don't know me, but I got your name from somebody." And I remember it because we were watching a basketball game, and Ed's and I, a diehard IU fan, and don't kill me, but I'm a diehard UK fan. And so we were actually watching.
Interview's over.
A lot of people
Cut.
say that. Ed says we have a mixed marriage too because half our kids
Yeah.
like IU, half
Yeah.
our kids like Kentucky.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're watching a basketball game. Cole, Amy, and Ed and I, and this girl calls me. "I don't know you, but somebody gave me your name that you might want to go to Africa with me." And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go."
I would have hung up.
Hang up the phone, and Ed's like, "You just told a stranger you would go to Africa with them?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because I always knew from a small age that I always felt a call toward Africa."
Mhm.
And when I say that, people look at me like I have 3 heads. But I remember I was a big tomboy as a kid, and I remember where I was playing with my Hot Wheels in my parents' driveway when I remember feeling the call that I would be in Africa someday. Now, I didn't know that it would look like what it looks like now.
Yeah.
But when she called me, I was like, "Here's my ticket." So then Amy, who was, I think she was 17 at the time, said, "Well, I want to go." And Ed said, "Now, wait a minute, because this is how people think." He said, "If you want to go there and get your head cut off, that's fine, but you're not taking our daughter." And I was like, people automatically think of danger when they think go to Africa. So I went to Africa on a mission trip a year later. So that was October of 2011. Amy went with me, and my sister went, and there was.
Can we back up just a minute? When the person called you out of the blue and said, "Do you want to go to Africa?" She got your name from somewhere. Let's don't skip over those details completely.
Okay.
She had to know that there had to be an interest of some sort there, or that you might be somebody who could help?
So what happened was I had been on the walk to Emmaus. Have you heard of the
Yes,
walk
I
to
have.
Emmaus? So I'd been
Absolutely.
on the walk to Emmaus, and I sat at a table with a girl named Jennifer Cox. Her husband's actually a eye doctor in Princeton. And just throughout that weekend, we had talked about different things. They have fostered and adopted, and we kind of got close, and and I don't even really remember talking to her about Africa, but we must have at some point because she's the one that told Stephanie, the gal that called me,
Hmm.
that I would be the person to take to Africa.
Okay.
And so when she called me, then it was a year-long process to figure out, okay, why are we going? How much is it going to cost? What are we going to do? Like, how long are we going to be there? Because at that time, I was still working. I was a police officer at Crane. Probably didn't know that either, did
I
you?
did not know that.
Yeah.
You're getting to know your Indiana neighbor really well today.
So I do have a degree in law
Yeah.
enforcement. So
Okay.
I
Yeah.
worked at Crane at
Hmm.
the Naval Base for 12 years.
Hmm.
Before that, I worked in Lawrence County at the jail.
Hmm.
But I was still working. I was like, I need
Yeah.
I need to know how long it's going
Hmm.
to be because you can't just take off
Right.
work. So I went with her, and we were gone for I think it was 10 days.
And why did they tell you you were going on? What was the mission?
So there was actually a group of a couple missionaries that lived there that worked with kids that had been rescued out of trafficking. So we were basically going to aid them and just see how we could best help them and interact with the kids. And it wasn't like I've been on mission trips before. Like I've been to Mexico where we built houses. We've done a lot of inner city work in Indianapolis, working in like the soup kitchen and stuff. It wasn't really like that. Um, this is going to sound bad, and I hope they don't. I don't. Anyway, to me, it that trip I likened it to poverty tourism, and that sounds horrible, but
Hmm.
that's pretty much what it was.
Right.
Basically, we just went and we just seen what was going on.
And that's what I think of when I think of Africa, right or wrong, because of what I've seen on TV, Feed the Children, things like that.
Yes,
Um, but that's what you initially went over there for.
that's basically what happened. And I'm not. If you know me, I'm kind of. I'm not a really emotional person. I don't
Hmm.
really. I'm not really cry a lot. I'm just not. It's just not.
Hmm.
Everybody always says I kind of have a hard exterior, but kind of soft on the inside. But so when we went, I saw things that just broke me. I mean, I remember coming home. It was right before Black Friday, and I remember I was in Walmart and I just had a full blown panic attack because people were fighting over. I think it was like the Furby or whatever that.
Yeah.
And it just made me so
Yeah.
mad because I had just been to
Yeah.
this third world country where people were literally starving. Like kids were literally being sold for 20 American dollars, to
Hmm.
work on
Yeah.
in this trade. And I was just distraught. I came home and I cried for 2 weeks straight. And Ed said, I don't know
Hmm.
if I have to institutionalize you. Like, I don't know what to do to help you
Hmm.
because this is not who you are. And I said, I feel like I can't not come back to this land of plenty and do nothing. And so Ed, being who Ed is, he says, well, then let's do something. And I was like, okay, what? I'm a middle aged woman that lives in Shoals, Indiana. What am
Hmm.
I going to do to impact a world, a place a world away? And so I spent the first year really just digging into research and figuring out why the child trafficking issue is the way it is in Ghana. And this is probably it's going to get really boring for you probably. But for the first year, I read statistics from International Labor Organization and different things. There's this book. I'm in the process of writing a book. You probably don't know that either.
No, but I'll read it.
Good,
And
because it's
I don't read books, but
oh
I'll read it.
good, because it's about the project and how it got
Yeah.
started in my life. And
Hmm.
my friend Rachel Hayden, who she lives in the South Knox area, we're writing it, and we're almost. I'm hoping that by the end of this year we'll be able to send it to the publisher. We're getting really close to being done with it.
Well, we'll give you updates on that for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I spent, like I said, that first year fundraising and figuring out what we're going to do because in Ghana there's no industry. So the only in 1963 they dammed this lake for hydroelectric power, basically. And in doing that, they displaced 80,000 people. Well, in displacing these people in these villages, it created this huge problem of these kids had nowhere to go. So people were sending their kids to live with other family members and other places further away from where they live. And basically, what was happening is the kids were being used in fishing. And when I say fishing, I wish I had brought out. I have one of the big fishing nets in the other room in there that shows you. It's as long as this room.
I'll get a picture of it. We'll post it.
Okay, good. And so these kids go out on these boats and they fish for 14 to 16 hours a day. They go out at night, and these kids are three. I mean, they start at 3 years old.
Yeah,
So you have grandkids like I have grandkids,
yes,
and
yes.
it to me, it was devastating for me to think that any 3-year-old kid would be working 14 to 16 hours a day at night on a fishing boat, and the kids they just bell water the 3, 4, 5-year-olds, but the other kids are fishing with nets. So they throw these nets out all night, bring these fish in, and these fish are little. I'll send you a video I have of me actually getting fish out of the net, and the reason why they use kids is because the fish are so little and it's hard to get these fish out of the nets, and so they use little fingers to get the fish out. But what's happening with these kids are they're telling the parents that they're giving them an education, that they're giving them all this stuff. Well, the parents have no way of knowing. I mean, they're in Africa. Now everybody has a cell phone, believe it or not. You'll be driving through the bush and there's people on a cell phone. I'm like, how do they have service here?
Yeah.
Like, but they're trafficked 11, 12, 13 hours away from their home. And they're fishing and they're being beaten. They're being tortured. I mean, I have a book and I'll send you, I think my friend Rachel has it, but I'll send you some pictures of it. They're kids that I know that have been rescued. There's this book that I have of where they drew their time of the lake. And every picture and every kid that I've ever talked to has a story of somebody they know that has had to dive in to untangle. Because remember, I said they dammed this lake, the Volta Lake, and there's a lot of trees still in it, and the nets get tangled. And the older kids will have to dive down and untangle them. Well, sometimes they don't come back up. I mean, there's piranhas. I mean, there's just a lot of things. Every kid that I've ever talked to that's been rescued has a story of somebody they know that has dove under and not come back. And so this is the life of 3-year-olds to 17-year-old kids in Ghana. Over 20,000 kids today are still trafficked in Ghana. And to me, the way I looked at it was, if that was my child or my niece or my cousin or a friend, I would do everything I could to ensure that they weren't living that life. Well, in God's eyes, they're all our kids.
Right.
So I said, I'm not going to stop. I'm going to continue to do what I need to do to ensure that no more kids are on that lake. So that's where the Micah 6-8 project started.
So Ed becomes supportive now, right? Eventually, right?
He was always supportive. He never wanted to go.
Never wanted to go
because he was terrified of flying.
but he did.
He did. It's funny because we actually flew down to Tampa to visit Butch and Bobby Krim.
Okay.
We went on I said, hey, let's just go just for 2 or 3 days. We'll get on a plane and you can see that it's not that bad. And he was like, I don't know. He even went to the doctor and got some happy pills so that he could fly. And he loved it. It was almost embarrassing because he was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, he was looking out the window. And so we got home from that trip and he said, I think I'll go to Africa someday. Well, that day I booked his ticket.
Okay. You didn't wait around.
I didn't. I came in that night and I said, I got our tickets for Africa. And he said, now, wait a minute. I thought I might want to pray about it. So, yeah, he went in 2017 for the first time.
So the human trafficking is of all these children, of course, and you have a history of fostering, adopting, but there's one little guy over there that got away from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you were able to follow his life,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been a good story. Tell the story of Sammy, if you would.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to. See, I'm not emotional until I talk about Sammy, but so in the process of fundraising and figuring out what we're going to do over there, we decided that we were going to build a rescue facility, for lack of a better word. And that never really worked out for us because we were like, okay, much like the foster care system in America, what happens when they become 18? Like, I don't want to build something and then when they become 18, be like, okay, see ya, you're on your own. So we were still trying to figure out what we were going to do, which is we started.
Now, can I step? When you say we, are you talking about you and Ed, or are you talking about a team? A group?
So at that point, so this was 2011. I spent the next year fundraising, researching. That was 2012. I actually organized a board of trustees in early 2013. A lot of things happened in 2013. We planted our church, we got our kids in foster care, and the project really took off.
Yeah.
That was like a monumental year
Uh-huh.
for us, I guess. I
Yeah.
think we lost our minds that year or something. But so I formed a board of trustees. All of them, every single one of them, I actually met on the walk to Emmaus. Now that
Yeah.
I think about it,
Mhm.
and they're a group of amazing people. They have my friend Kim Williams. We'll talk about her a little bit later with Jacob's Wells, but she always says that I'm the visionary, and they're the ones that make sure that it happens,
Mhm.
and that's pretty much how it works. But back to the whole
Mhm.
Sammy thing. So we were doing a prayer 5K. I don't run, so I was like, I'm not doing a 5K. So my friend Becky Boyles came up with the idea of let's do a prayer 5K. So people signed up for a slot, they paid money, and then at the end of this prayer 5K, so you spent it was like a day and a half that people would sign up for a slot to pray. And in that time they signed up, they I don't even remember the amount that they paid to do that. It was a fundraising thing. At the end of that, we had a prayer and worship service at Lauren Alexander's church in Bicknell. And I had a friend of mine, Christopher Knopf, that was very passionate about Ghana. He was on that first mission trip that we went on, and he had been back a couple of times to kind of do some research for us and figure out, where was the best place to work. And he had taken a bunch of pictures. And there was one picture in particular that we were at this prayer and worship service that came up on the screen, and it just broke Ed apart. And it's this little boy on a boat, and he was 3 years old, and we didn't know who this little boy was. And it just did something to Ed in that he couldn't quit thinking about him. It's funny because he put his picture on his phone screen. Well, every time his phone screen would light up, he would just weep because,
Wow.
and I was like, you're gonna have to
Mhm.
change that
Yeah.
picture. Like,
Mhm.
there's something you're gonna have to do. And um, so in November of 2013, I think it was November time. I'd have to read the book to find out
All right. All
specific
right.
specific dates, but I had the board of trustees for the project. I had told them that two things: to be on the board, you had to contribute monthly because we can't expect other people to be donors monthly if we're not giving ourselves. So everybody on the board has to contribute a certain amount a month. If they can go above that, but they can't go below that, and it's
Mhm.
like $50. It's very minimal. Um, and then the other thing was I wanted all of them to go to Ghana just one time. They didn't have to ever go back, but I felt like they needed to put eyes on what we were doing. So we did that, and I took Sammy's picture with me. I didn't know his name was Sammy at the time, but I had my phone, and we went down to the Volta Lake. We spent 2 days down there, and I asked every kid I could, "Do you know this boy? Do you know?" And everybody knew him. Everybody said, "Oh, that's Samuel. That's Samuel. That's," and then they would call him. Some people call him Sammy, but he's not here. We haven't seen him in a while. And so I was, at that point, I was like, well, we're not going to find him. Like, this is just a pipe dream of ever even trying to find this boy. But I knew I wanted to do all I could to find him just so that I could try to make his life a little bit better. Well, um, that night before we were supposed to leave, we have one man on our board, and his name is Hack. Well, his name's not Hack. His name's Matthew Hackler, but he goes by Hack.
Okay.
And he's a big, burly, hairy guy. And it's funny because he's probably softer than any of us women on the
Right.
board. And came to me that night in Africa, and he said, "Hey, I feel like we have all these toys that we're going to take to this other organization, and they're already blessed. Like, they already have everything they need. I think we need to go back to the lake and give all of our toys, all of our candy, and everything away." And I said, "Heck, we just can't. Like, we have to be up and on the road at 5 o'clock because I don't really tell people this a lot, but the road from Kamasi, Zingana to Yeji is a very dangerous road, and there's strategically you have to plan your travel just for safety reasons." And I said, "Heck, we really can't. Like, we have to be on the road at this certain time." And he was like, "Okay, I understand. I understand." Well, that night I laid down in bed and I just felt this overwhelming sense of, if Hack thinks that this, he's not one to usually speak up and say, "Hey, I feel like we need to do this." Kind of like the fostering thing with Ed. And if he really feels like that, maybe we can make it work. So we went back to the lake that next morning, and I had just had carpal tunnel surgery again on my other hand. So I had one hand when we got the kids, the other hand. And the day before, I'd had a splint on my hand, and the moms and the kids pulling to get the candy and different things had hurt my hand. And I said, I'm just going to stand back and take pictures. You guys go ahead down to the lake, um, form the line. That's what our driver told the people, form the line, because the kids were at that point coming off of the lake on all these kids. And I was standing back, and I turned around to take a picture of the sunrise was just, it was just beautiful. And I turned around, I was taking pictures. And when I turned around, standing right in front of me was Sammy.
How did you know that?
I just knew.
You just knew that was
I
him
knew that
from
was
the
him.
picture.
And I'll send you those pictures too. And I just wept. And I told a friend of mine came over, and I said, Kim, this is him. This is Sammy. And she said, are you sure? And I said, yeah. And I have pictures of me holding him, and I had given him a sucker. And of course, the pictures are awful because I'm like ugly crying. And I had texted Ed, and I'll actually send you that text message that I'd sent him, and I'm like, I found him.
I've seen that
Yeah.
exchange.
Oh, you probably saw that on mine.
Yes, that's amazing.
And of course, Ed's like, what did he say? Well, he didn't say anything, Ed, because.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spent a little bit of time there, and I was like, okay, I found him now. How am I gonna leave this child?
Right.
So I handed him to Hack, and Hack's like, don't hand him to me, like I'm not. So I handed him to Hack, and I got in the van, and I just at that point I knew that my heart was forever changed. Like I knew that this was my boy.
At that time, was he still being trafficked?
Yes, he was still working on the lake, and so he was 3. And so it's God works so funny because there was one boy besides Sammy in particular that was going to be our first rescue child off the lake, and that was a boy named Gideon. And I had told Kwame, our in-country director, I'm like, this is the child that we're the first child we're getting is Gideon. Well, throughout our time of trying to get Gideon off the lake, we realized that Gideon is actually Sammy's half brother.
Okay.
And we didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I got home, and Kwame had called me and said, Mom, if you could adopt Sammy, would you adopt him? And I said, absolutely. So we began the adoption process of him, and my friend Nikki and her husband Mike began the adoption process of his brother Simone. And then we found families that would adopt the other brothers. Well, so that was in 2013. Uh, we spent a lot of time doing paperwork and figuring out how we were going to get everything done. And the boys, 2 of the boys, Sammy and Simone, at that time had went to live with Kwame. So for 6, 7, 8 months, those boys had, because over there that's how they do the transitioning process. And I remember on April 1st of 2014, I thought it was an April Fool's joke. Kwame had called me, and he'd went to court that day because we were supposed to travel 2 weeks. I think it was about 2 weeks later to go to court. Me and 2 other women were supposed to go. They were adopting the other kids, and we were supposed to travel to go to court. And he called me and said, "Mom, the adoption's not going to work." And I said, "Oh, Kwame, it's April Fool, whatever." But no, it it really fell through just because the dad decided that he wanted a lot of money, and the court system was like, "No, this is not what we do. This is basically trafficking.
Yeah. We're
not going to do that." And so at that point, it was pretty devastating. And I think at that point was probably a turning point for me in that I felt like I didn't want to go back. I was like, this is not, again, I'm not very emotional. I don't like to cry. I don't like to feel, I don't like feelings, Greg. And
but we all have them.
Yes. And that could have been a good point for me to quit, but I didn't, because then um, just who I am rose up in me, and I said, you know what? No, if I can't have Sammy here with me, I'm going to make his life as good as I can where he's at. And that's what we did. So I don't know if I told you, we began building vocational training schools for the parents, because we felt like since there's no industry, if we could teach them a trade, sewing, cooking, hair weaving, soap making, if we could teach them a trade, then they wouldn't have to resort to selling their kids to slavery or using their kids in slavery to make money. So we did that. for a couple years. And actually, Sammy's mom graduated. You probably saw that on my Facebook. She
Yeah.
graduated from one of our programs and was actually able to get away from Sammy's dad. So they're Muslim, and over in the Muslim culture, you can have as many wives as you want. And so he had three at the time, I think, and it wasn't a very good um, relationship. And so she was actually able, through our vocational training school, she was actually able to start her own business, get her own apartment, and take care of Sammy and his younger brother Enoch. And their story has been a success story in that in our vocational training schools, when you graduate, you get a sewing machine. Your sponsor buys you a sewing machine. So we do a sponsorship program. And so you have no excuse not to start a business. No excuse at all. You have everything you need to do it. And the majority of our people have. There has been a few that haven't, but most people, it's been very successful. And that's where I thought we would stop with
Mhm.
vocational training schools, and but we didn't. People laugh at me all the time. They're like, "Why don't you just like stop doing? Because you're already doing this, this, and this. Why don't you just do that to the best of your ability?" And I'm like, "Well, if God tells me that I need to do something, I'm gonna, as long as I'm able, I'm gonna do it." And after after we built our vocational training school in Yeji, so we had a school in Senya, which is on the coast. So it's 11 hours from Yeji. Yeji is the slave hub of Ghana. That's where they used to take the kids and auction them off up on a hill. They don't do that anymore. I mean, they would just put these kids up there and auction them off to slave masters. To me, I just can't even.
Yeah.
I can't think about that. Um, but so everybody's like, why would you go to Yeji? And I'm like, that's the slave hub. If we're
Right.
going to impact change, that's where we need to be. We are the only organization of whites. They call you Obrunis over there. That's Obruni, Obruni. That means white foreigner. We're the only organization that has continued to come back into Yeji and work. There's a friend of mine, Robin, who lives in Kansas City. She has a organization called Isaac Stream, and they work on another part of the lake down in Yeji One. So they're just right outside of Yeji. But I said, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. We're gonna go right in the middle, and it's been hard. There's been a lot of opposition. Like I said, it's a Muslim community. Um, but I have found that some of the people that I love the most are in that community and are Muslim and are just amazing people.
You've been able to go back and see Sammy and others, and Sammy's in school.
Yeah. So when we, excuse me. So when Ed went on, so Ed went in 2017 because that was his. He said, if I can get on a plane and I can see Sammy, I'm going. So we went. He met Sammy, and again it changed his life too. And so we went back in 2018, and it was Ed and myself, Matt and Lori Kerner. I don't know if you know Matt and Lori. So Matt actually does these pictures and he paints them upside down. So all these. So Matt's a preacher in Washington. Donna and Kara Cave and Patty Gwaltney, she was born in 1923, and she's been to Africa with me 7 times.
1923. She'll be giving up on 100.
And she just went with me.
Oh my.
She still goes.
Yeah.
She told me, she said, I will go until the day I die.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we went in 2018 and we saw the place where we were building our vocational training school. And Kwame said, hey, Mom, there's a land over here that's for sale. Would you like to buy it? And I was like, yeah, I think we could buy that. We could put a guest house on it. That'd be great. And then God kind of smacked me around with like, why would you build a guest house when there's more you can do? And so I called Kwame when I got home and I was like, hey, I think we might need to build a school. And he said, I knew that. I knew that. I was just waiting for you to come to me. So we built our school in 2018. It opened in 2019. And to this day, we have 341 kids in our school. Sammy and all of his brothers are in our school. Sammy is actually the brightest kid in his class. They tell me every time I go that he's always there. He loves to learn. Um, it's just an amazing, I think back now that if I had quit, what would have happened?
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever, and I tell people this all the time, I don't ever want people to think of Micah 6 8 Project and think it's me or look at me because I really haven't done anything. I've just, people, we have the most amazing people that have supported us and backed this project. And um, I don't ever want anybody to say, oh, look at what you've done. No, because it's not. Without Kwame and without God's leading, like we could never have done
Mhm.
what we do.
So that will continue.
Oh,
And
yeah, until I die.
so that's the Micah 6:8 project. What about the Jacob's Well project? Tell me a little bit about that. Um, I know that you talked to the third grade class at Lagodi Elementary
I
about that.
did, yes,
That
yes.
that had to have been quite a story. But before we even get into that, tell me the Jacob's Well project, how that started, and the impact you've been able to
Mm.
carry into that area.
So I don't know if you know anything about Jacob's Wells, but 2017, one of my very best friends, she's actually the accountant who says I'm an accountant's worst nightmare, by the way. She's our accountant for the project. So her son, Jacob Williams, died in a drowning accident. It was June 30th of 2017. He went to North Knox. I don't know if you know anything about Jacob, but amazing athlete. Uh, he hilarious kid, a little bit obnoxious. I always tell people he's the funniest. He was the funniest. I when I think of Riken, that's what I think of. And Riken loved Jacob. Like Riken just absolutely adored Jacob. Actually, I think it was just a few weeks before Jacob passed away. Jacob was teaching Riken how to dunk. Well, Riken is the 0th percentile for height and weight. The kid's never going to dunk, but Jacob was teaching him. But I was actually in Oklahoma when Jacob had passed away, or when he had went missing. And my friend Nikki had called me and said, "Have you heard any of the news?" And I said, "What news?" And she said, "In Oaktown." And I said, "Yeah, I heard there was a boy missing." And as soon as I said it, I knew. And I said, "Don't tell me it was Jacob." And she said it was. So I texted my friend Kim and I said, "What do you need?" And she said, "I need my friend here." So Millie and I got on a plane, came home. I took Millie to my parents' house in Bedford, and I went to Kim. So he went missing on a Friday. Saturday, they found his body. I went to Kim's house on Sunday, and we were sitting out on her porch, and we were just talking about Jacob's life and how much of an impact he had on kids. And he was just one of those kids that always made every kid feel like they were someone. And we were talking about different things. And I said, I was reading in the Bible last night and I was taken to the verse or the scripture that talked about Jacob's well. And I said, what do you think about honoring Jacob's life by doing water wells? And most people would probably have thought it's kind of soon to be talking but that's just how I work. And at that time, Kim's daughter Megan had come out and she had worked for Clayton King Ministries down in, I don't know if it's Atlanta or somewhere down there. And the theme verse for that season that she had worked, or the theme scripture, was that scripture about Jacob's wells. And she said, this has to be. So I got working right away on that. And people really got behind the thought of digging these boreholes to bring clean water to people, because that's something that people can tangibly see. And since 2017, we've put in 18 clean water wells
in the same community that you're working with
all over Ghana.
in Ghana.
All over Ghana. We've actually had some requests to go outside of Ghana, but we feel like that our focus is just in Ghana. And we for the first 2 years, we dug as many as we could because it's $3,500 to dig a well. And then we decided, well, we better just scale it down to 2 wells a year. So Kwame, like I said, he's absolutely amazing. He's our in-country director. If he's boots on the ground all the time, works nonstop for the project. He finds the poorest of the poor communities that don't have clean water, and that's where we dig our water wells. Well, it wasn't until I think it was actually last year. Kim said to me, she said, "Do you realize that the thing that took Jacob is the thing that we're using to honor his life?" And I thought, I had never really thought about that. He died in this drowning accident, but yet the clean water that is being provided to so many people in Ghana, I mean, there's such a parallel there of, um,
So these children, these adults, had never really had clean water before.
oh no, no. That's one of the worst problems in Ghana. And as a matter of fact, the majority of the deaths, infant deaths, just any kind of low mortality rate is because of the lack of clean water.
They've never seen running water.
No, they have never seen running water. And so to watch one of these wells being dug is amazing. I've seen several of them be dug. The first one actually went to Kwame's house that he was building. They wanted the first one to go there, which every water well provides water to several people in the community. And Ed was actually there for that one. And it's kind of neat to watch it being done because they put these 10-foot pipes in the ground, and they had to put 11 down, so 110 feet down before they hit water. And when they hit water, it's amazing to watch the people. They celebrate, they dance, they um, and the other thing about the water wells is it's gotten us. If we had not had the water wells, we would not be in the areas working that we are in now, because we have been able to get into areas that people that have been trying to get into for years have never been able to by providing clean water. Like in Islamic school, we were 2019, 18 or 19, we were able to go into an Islamic school and preach Jesus because of a water well we dug there. That's the reason that we are so well respected in Yeji, because we have provided clean water wells. I was actually honored by their district assembly. It's kind of like a parliament to liken it to, and they invited me in and the team that was with us, and they gave us an honor because they said we've had white people come here before, but nobody has continued to come back to help the way you guys are helping.
Yeah. So when you guys went over, though, did you have supplies for yourself in regards to water and food? Because if you didn't have clean water over there, I'm guessing a lot of people would be difficult to go back.
Right. It's hard. I mean, it's not easy. Everybody always is like, "Oh, well, you go to Africa, you post these pictures. It's like you just and I do love it, but it's difficult. It is hard. Like, number one, it's hot in Africa.
Yeah.
My friend Kim, we always said that's her deep thoughts when she went to Africa. It's hot in Africa. There's a lot of people in Africa. But we do
a lot of hot people.
A lot of hot people. We do buy water. You can buy bottled water, but it's very expensive.
So that's why they haven't had access. They've had access, but they haven't been able to afford it. So they're drinking water
out of the lake,
out of this dirty lake.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish I'd have brought, and I'll send you a picture of that. You
got a
probably saw
picture.
the clean water and the
They're
dirty
looking
water.
at that right now as you speak. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's a comparison. This is a comparison of clean water that we have, bottled water, and the bottled water or the water that those children would be drinking
That came from the Volta Lake.
that
Yeah.
came from the lake. That's amazing.
Yeah. And they wash their clothes. I don't know how they get their clothes. I do. They can get their whites so white. Well, it's because they can still use phosphates. But they in that dirty water, I'm like, how do they get their clothes so clean? They don't have washing machines.
So how many wells do you, as you go forward, is this a continuing project?
As long as we have money coming in, we will.
And that money comes from where? How can people contribute to help you?
So we do have most of our people always ask me that all the time. How do you get money to do what you do? Up until a year and a half ago, I didn't get paid any money to do. And as a matter of fact, I still wouldn't if it wasn't for Kim Williams just basically strong arming me into taking a salary. I get $300 a month basically to do the project. I didn't even want that. I mean, like I was very adamant against not doing that because I wanted 100% of our money to go to what we do. And it does. But the money that comes in to our project goes straight to paying our teachers, building our water wells, operating our school. Our school is operated for free. The whole part of behind our school was that it could be free and that it was for the kids that would otherwise be trafficked on the Volta Lake. If kids were already in school and they came to register, we turned them away. We said, you need to go back to the school you're in because your parents can afford it. So we have 341 kids in our school that would otherwise be working on the Volta Lake. Which, think about the impact of that. Yeah. It sometimes that is lost on me because I don't think about how big that is in the grand scheme of things. But the money, so we have a sponsorship program. So all of our kids can be sponsored. I think of the 341, I think we have like 175 kids sponsored. So there's still plenty open if anybody wants to sponsor. And then our wells, we have people that donate monthly for that. I will say that in the last couple of years, and we were afraid this would happen the further out from the anniversary of Jacob's passing, um, our well fund has gone down some, but it's funny because people always ask right at the right time, how much money does it cost to dig a well? And then we always get a check for that 3,500. So our goal is to do 2 wells a year.
Yeah.
Until.
Okay. Okay. So they can message you on Facebook for one to
Yep.
find out more information, but otherwise, is there a fund set up at a particular bank, or how do you?
Yes. So don't kill me.
No,
I bank at Crane Credit Union, but
I'm retired from Crane Credit Union.
so all of our other stuff is through Old National.
Great organization.
It is. It is. It was devastating when they closed the one here.
Yeah.
But so we have Micah 6'8", and Jacob's Wells. It's all one organization. Everything is under the same 501c3. And so on our website, if you go to our website, which is just www.micah68project.com, no colon or something, whatever. There's a page that goes to donate, and you can sign up to be a sponsor. You can sign up to donate monthly. You can send money in through PayPal, just as just a one-time donation or whatever. Now, I will say that if you do sponsor a child, there's several people from Lagodi and Shoals that do sponsor children. I always tell people that if you want to get involved, that's the best way to do it. It's $35 a month, which is basically nothing. And every time I go, which is twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year, you have an opportunity to write your child. And when I come back, you have something from your child, either a picture that's colored, and I always take pictures of kids and bring back, but they always either write something or color something so that you have a tangible piece of their life, being a part of it, and you can watch them grow.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So tell me a little bit about going to the elementary school, talking to third grade. Was it third grade?
Yeah, it was third grade.
So third grade children in a classroom. What was your message to them, and how was it received?
So Krista Truelove had actually messaged me because last year we were the mission at Camp Ileana. The project, we spent the whole summer there, and we were reading a book called, oh my goodness, I can't even, anyway, it's Princess Gigi is what it was, and it's basically a book about a little girl in Africa and their trip to get water. And so at Camp Ileana last year, actually Lacey, Wade's 2 little girls were in one of the sessions, and they were like, we've seen this book at school. And for the little ones, like kindergarten, first grade, that's basically the best way you can teach them about what happens in Africa. Just read them a book.
Right.
So I was reading that story, and Krista messaged me and said, every year we read that book. Every year we talk about this. Would you come in? I said, I would love that. Like, I am all about, getting people to know what happens. So I went in there, and of course it was, I'm telling you what, the Lagodi third grade teachers are some of the best. My kids, 2 of my kids had Brittany, which Brittany Gibson
she's my niece.
Is she really?
She's my niece.
I'm telling you what, she is fantastic.
Fantastic, Brittany.
She advocated for Riken and Millie, and just to get their learning disability stuff. Like, she just
very, very caring person.
Oh my goodness. And Krista, and then
Krista Truelove too.
Yeah, Krista, and then now of course you have Angie Brookshire down there, who's just amazing. Angie's just a nut, and I just love her.
Wow, that's quite a trio right there.
Oh, it is. It is. And so I went in there, and not knowing, kind of, you don't know how to talk to kids at that age. It's hard to get adults to understand what happens, let alone kids. So I went in and I read that book to them, and we just talked about clean water. And usually when it's like kids that age, I always say, now, how many of your kids brush your teeth every morning? And I hope they all raise their hand, but some of them. And I'm like, think about running water. Like, that's something that I've been mindful of. I actually, in my bathroom, I have a picture that I took of kids that were under one of our water wells in Africa, and I have it in my bathroom for that reason, to make me be mindful of not turning my faucet on, just letting it run. And I said, how many of you guys have water that comes out of that faucet? And they're like, well, yeah, And I said, imagine if you had this water, and that was the dirty water, to brush your teeth. So that, kind of strategically thinking of how can they think, okay, there's kids my age that don't have access to the things that I use, school, clean water, clothes, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
I loved it. It was,
What kind of questions did you
oh my goodness.
get?
Well, I got all kinds of questions. I got some that I was like, I don't even know how to answer this, but
Hmm.
most of the questions were basically about, um, well, one little boy asked if they liked basketball, and I'm like, they don't really. They like soccer, but they call it football over there. They
That's
don't really.
hilarious. Yeah.
Basketball's Brooklyn.
Hmm.
When she went, Brooklyn went, and she tried to
Hmm.
teach them basketball. They were
Hmm.
horrible at basketball.
Yeah.
Um, some of them asked like how long they have to walk to get water,
Yeah.
different things like that. What
Just
kind of
some,
clothes
yeah,
they
just
wear.
things that there's no way they can fathom.
No,
Did you have videos for them
I
or?
did.
Hmm.
So we actually have a YouTube page
Yeah,
that has. Did you see that?
I have.
That
Hmm.
has all of our videos that we've done. And I was telling them that all of our professional videos that are on there, like the Jacob's Well video, and there's actually a prison video, which is a different. Then we didn't talk about the prison system over there, but all of those were actually done by an individual in Ghana who was a street kid
Oh,
for a
okay.
long time. He's
Okay.
Isaac. That my friend Robin that I told you has Isaac
Uh-huh.
Stream. He's Isaac of
Okay.
Isaac Stream. So
Very good.
he does all of our
Very good.
videos.
You spoke of Brooklyn.
Yep.
Brooklyn Jones, who is a state champion, Lagodi High School basketball player, and playing well at St. Mary's College, but a
Hmm.
terrific athlete. But Brooklyn had her own. If you're okay to talk about that,
Oh
I'm saying
yeah.
if Brooklyn is, I believe, but
She doesn't care.
Brooklyn had her own childhood issues,
Hmm.
and you came into her life. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when Ed coached varsity girls basketball over here at Shoals for a number of years, and Brooklyn, as a varsity coach, you have to um, make an appearance at all these things. Which Brian Smith and I have known each other for 15 years. I don't know if you know that or not. So Brian actually coached my son Cole for his 4 years of high school,
Did he? Okay.
and I did his book for him all 4 years over
Okay.
here. And if you've not sat close to the bench when Brian Smith is
Hmm.
coaching, do it because it's like a comedic act. I mean, it's hilarious. That guy
Now,
is
now, wait a minute.
hilarious.
He's pretty dry.
Well, yes, but he comes up with these one-liners
Yeah.
to refs, and
Yeah.
you're like,
Okay.
anyway. So we were actually at a fifth and sixth grade basketball game down here, and there was this little girl playing basketball who had Kool-Aid stained hair and
Hmm.
was just a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
But she was sliding all over the floor, and I was like, man, that girl doesn't have any shoes. That next day, Ed went out and bought her a brand new pair of
Yeah.
shoes that were the same shoes that the varsity players wore, and took them to her. Actually, I think they had a game the next day or the day after, and I actually took him over to the bench, gave him to the coach, and said, "Hey, just give these." I didn't even really know her name at that point. Give these to this little girl. She wore the shoes. Her dad called me, was furious. I didn't even know him at the time, and he was like, "My daughter has shoes, but you don't need to." I was like, "Okay, sorry."
Yeah.
And we laugh about that now. Jimmy and he's a good friend of ours now, and we laugh about it now because I was like, "Man, you were mad when you called me." And he's like,
Hmm.
"I don't even remember that."
Pride thing, right?
Yes.
Hmm.
So just actually that's the reason that we went into foster care because we were like, there could be
Hmm.
an opportunity that we could help
Hmm.
this little girl. And through just the course of events, we just became a resource for Jimmy, her dad, and just when he was going through overcomers classes, he'd ask Ed to be a sponsor. Didn't even know Ed, and Ed's like, "I'll be your sponsor, but I'm going to tell you, you will call me every day. I will see you every day. I will." And it's been a really neat thing to watch him progress throughout
Hmm.
life through these last it's probably been 8 or 9 years now of sobriety. And we've just, Brooklyn is just like one of our kids.
Yeah. And
She,
it's great to see. And I don't know Brooklyn well, of
hmm
course, through sports. I do, but everything I know about Brooklyn seems to be very respectful,
very.
young adult, somebody who you would never have thought would have come up with from a difficult childhood, but has adapted very well.
She is her own success story in its own right. And I told her right before she went to college because I took her on all of her college visits and um, the St. Mary's coach, well, he just left. I don't know if you know that or
I did
not,
not
but
know that.
the St. Mary's coach that was there, he and I were in contact all the time. Like last year, like I can't remember. Brooklyn she's a little bit stubborn and she wasn't eating right or something. He said, "No, I'm going to call Christy," and she'd be like, "No, I'll go eat. I'll go,"
Hmm.
Um, and
Hmm.
I told her right when she went to college, it was moving day when we moved her into college last year. I said, "You know what, Brooklyn? One of these days, you're going to tell your story." and it's going to change somebody's life
Yeah.
because your story is an amazing story of resilience, an amazing story of persistence, and she's just an amazing girl. I mean, I cannot say enough about that girl. Now she drives me crazy at times, just like last night she texted me and said, "Hey, coming over because I got this packet from college you need to fill out. I don't know what it is." I'm like, "Okay, come on over."
Well, I'll tell you what, you're an amazing woman.
Well, thanks.
And that's why we're doing this story. It's a story that has to be told. We talked about an awful lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And you will for sure, once we leave this setting, you'll say, I wish I would have said this or something to that. But I'll give you an opportunity. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to bring up that you think it's important to get across?
I don't. The only thing that I can think of is I look at kids in today's world, and I think we don't give them enough credit. I think that this world is a hard, hard world that we live in, and as parents, or what you and Coach Wagner do on the radio, and you guys do an amazing job of encouraging kids. And I think that's, as adults, that's what we need to show, is we need to show kids that they are somebody, that they are special, that they can do things that maybe they wouldn't have thought that they could do.
And not just athletes.
Not just
right?
athletes.
Because we tend to gravitate there, but
not
and
all
not
of my
just
kids are
musicians,
athletes. I mean, it's just
but every kid, right?
yeah.
Every young child.
That's one thing that drives me crazy sometimes about awards days at school. Like 2 years ago, um, this younger set of kids aren't one. They don't really get a lot of school awards because they struggle so hard to get the grades they get because they have these learning disabilities and things just from their past that have just been a hindrance to them. And so 2 years ago, we did our own awards at home.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did like a perseverance award or a handwriting award. So I even made up these certificates, and we did a presentation at home, and I even took pictures of them, and they probably thought it was the cheesiest thing ever, but I was like,
and they'll have that when they're adults.
They need an award too.
Okay. Anything else?
Nope, not that I can think of.
Christy, thanks so much.
Thank you.
She's amazing. And like I said, some of you knew some of her story. I knew just a little bit of her story, but I knew that it had to be told, and I hope you enjoyed it. We enjoyed talking to Christy, and she's our Indiana neighbor that we got to know today, and we thank you all for watching.